of anonymity. I mean, every man's right and gift is too late once it's gone. You know, once they've seen that big red Monday morning eye up on the glorious cinemascopic screen and full red living color, everybody knows you and you don't know nobody. You know, it's kind of a hard way to go.
In 1969, Robert Mitchum rolled into Ireland behind the wheel of a rare Porsche 911 Targa. Only 307 of those beauties ever existed. He cruised it all over the set of Ryan's Daughter, turning heads wherever he went, and then, out of nowhere, the car vanished for 40 long years. Nobody had a clue where it disappeared or why Mitchum decided to bury it in mystery. When collectors finally uncovered it decades later, what they found inside was wild. The trunk held traces of his secret flings with Hollywood's biggest icons, proof of habits he kept hidden from the public, and even a piece of evidence from that infamous 1948 arrest that was never meant to see daylight again. That discovery revealed a side of Mitchum that Hollywood could never quite pin down. Robert Mitchum, born Robert Charles Derman Mitchum on August 6, 1917 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, carried a heavy story from the very beginning. His mother, Anne Harriet Gunderson, a Norwegian immigrant fighting to hold her family together, and his father, James Thomas Mitchum, a shipyard and railroad worker breaking his back for little pay, lived through hard times. But tragedy hit early. When Robert was just 2, his father died in a brutal rail yard accident. In a heartbeat, his mother became a widow with 3 kids and barely enough to scrape by. From then on, life turned into constant motion. Anne worked odd jobs, kept packing up, and never stopped searching for the next sliver of stability. The tension in the Mitchum house never really went away. Worry lived in every corner. Robert grew up surrounded by tired faces and pockets that emptied fast. Even though he was too young to truly grasp it, losing his father left a hole that never closed. That emptiness shaped him deep down. Later, he'd admit that watching his mother juggle bills and stress nonstop taught him to depend on himself and trust no one too easily. When rules fail your family, you start seeing them as lies, and that's exactly what happened to Robert. After his father's death, the family bounced between Bridgeport, New York, and Delaware, always trying to start over. Then came a British stepfather who was strict and distant, a man Robert never clicked with. Every new move was supposed to be a clean slate, but for him, it just felt like another place where people expected him to sit still and stay quiet. But Robert wasn't built for that. Not at all. He butted heads with anyone trying to control him, and that included his stepfather. The fights at home spilled into school, and before long, Defiance became his trademark. When he was just 12, his exhausted mother sent him to live with his grandparents in Felton, Delaware, hoping some peace and structure might straighten him out. But instead, the fire got bigger. Robert picked a fight with the principal and got himself expelled. And it wasn't some small outburst either. It was chaos. But soon, people moved on, brushing it off like just another episode in the stormy life of young Robert Mitchum. That wild streak became his trademark, the clearest sign of who Robert Mitchum was turning into. When the family moved to New York's Hell's Kitchen, everyone hoped a new start might calm him down. But trouble followed him like a shadow. He enrolled at Hardened High School, but within months, he got expelled again after another heated fight. At that point, it wasn't just a story about a restless kid. It was about a boy completely slipping off the straight path, with no school, no structure, and no one who could really reach him. Home wasn't peaceful either. Without stability, Robert started bouncing between relatives. And when that failed, he hit the streets. That back-and-forth lifestyle toughened him up fast. Every expulsion, every argument, every night without a bed made him feel more distant from a world that kept trying to box him in. By his teenage years, he'd transformed into a full-blown drifter, hopping freight trains across the country and picking up any job that paid just enough to survive. He dug ditches, picked fruit under burning sun, scrubbed dishes until his hands bled, and even stepped into boxing rings for cash. The money was trash, the hours were brutal, but what mattered most was the freedom. He didn't want anyone telling him what to do ever again. This was the Great Depression. The roads were filled with people like him, restless, broke, and chasing the next meal. Survival was the only goal. one day at a time. Years later, Mitchum said those rail years taught him how to outsmart both nature and society, lessons that stuck in his bones forever. Then came one of the most unbelievable chapters in his early life, the summer of 1933. At just 14, he got arrested in Savannah, Georgia for vagrancy and was sentenced to a chain gang at Chatham County Camp Number 1. Imagine that. A kid in chains, learning the hard way what defiance really costs. Rumors spread fast. Some said the cops tried to tie Robert Mitchum to a shoe store robbery, but he swore he was innocent. He even pointed out that the crime went down while he was already locked up. Still, none of that mattered much back then. After only a few days on that brutal chain gang, he pulled off something wild. He escaped. Reports say he bolted through the fields while gunshots echoed behind him, running for his life with nothing but pure grit and luck keeping him going. He hitchhiked all the way back to Rising Sun, Delaware, where his family had moved, showing up like a ghost no one expected to see again. Whether every detail of that story is perfectly true or not, one thing's certain. The experience carved something deep into him. It gave him a lifelong hatred of authority and a hard-earned distrust of the justice system. From then on, Mitchum lived by his own street rules, the kind of survival code you only learn when the world turns its back on you. There were whispers that sometimes when he was broke and hungry, he'd even turn himself in just to get a bed and a meal. That's how sharp his instincts for survival were. But even with all that edge, there was another side to him that shocked people. He wasn't just fists and fights. As a kid, he wrote poetry, and one of his poems even got published in a local newspaper when he was just 9 years old. Imagine that, a runaway rebel with a poet's heart. So inside one person, you had this wild mix, a boy who could write, a boy who could fight, and a boy who could disappear down the tracks only to come back tougher than before. He even boxed semi-professionally, reportedly earning $25 a match. Later, he joined Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps, working long, punishing days that hardened him even more while shaping the legend he was becoming. At night, Robert boxed to blow off steam, fists flying, sweat pouring, using every punch to shake off the weight of the day. That mix of poetry and brawling wasn't just a phase. It was a window into who he really was. He craved expression, but also chased escape, always caught between the fighter and the dreamer inside him. Then in 1933, everything shifted in a way that would shape the rest of his life. At a swimming hole near Camden, Delaware, he met Dorothy Spence, and everything changed the second they locked eyes. He was 16, she was younger, just 14, and at the time she was actually seeing his younger brother, John. Talk about tension, but Robert couldn't stay away. That spark didn't fade. It only grew stronger. Their connection turned serious, and by 1940, they tied the knot. Dorothy was 20 when they married, but not everyone celebrated. Family drama hit hard. John refused to even show up at the wedding, and the grudge hung around for years. Still, Dorothy stuck with Robert through everything. The disappearances, the scandals, the heartbreak, and the betrayals. Against all odds, their marriage lasted a jaw-dropping 57 years, right up until his death in 1997. It started young, it started messy, but somehow it held on strong. By 1936, Robert's restless energy took him west. He followed his sister Julie to Long Beach, California, chasing whatever came next. Julie was part of a local acting group called the Players Guild, and Robert joined in. First backstage as a stagehand, then stepping into small roles whenever he got the chance. In August 1937, he made his debut, and something clicked deep inside him. The stage gave him purpose, a place to pour all that restless fire into something real. He didn't just act either. He started writing. He created 2 children's plays for the Guild and even wrote song lyrics and monologues for Julie's nightclub shows. It was the start of a transformation. The rough-edged drifter finding his way into the spotlight with words, rhythm, and raw emotion leading the way. Robert Mitchum's rise wasn't some polished Hollywood fairy tale. It was raw, messy, and real. He didn't train in fancy acting schools or climb the ladder step by step. He was a drifter who stumbled into a doorway and for the first time realized he might actually belong somewhere. But just as he started finding his rhythm, World War II hit, throwing his life into another grind that nearly broke him. He landed a job as a machine operator at Lockheed Aircraft, working brutal shifts surrounded by endless noise, smoke, and stress. The pressure crushed him, physically and mentally. The exhaustion got so bad that he suffered a nervous breakdown that left him temporarily blind. Doctors said it was the result of non-stop strain and factory fatigue, and that diagnosis forced him to face the truth. This life was killing him. When he finally recovered, Mitchum made a bold move. He headed straight back to California, determined to chase acting for real this time. No more hobbies, no more drifting. This was survival with purpose. He started small, taking uncredited roles, the kind where your face flashes across the screen and vanishes before the audience even learns your name. He picked up whatever work he could at RKO and other studios, never turning down a chance to prove himself. In 1943, he caught a small break, a bit part in the Hopalong Cassidy Western series. That tiny role cracked open the door to a string of appearances in war films and B-level westerns. His first credited role came as Quinn in the 1943 Western Border Patrol. It wasn't fame yet, but it was movement, real progress. What made him stand out was how he didn't try too hard. He didn't chase the camera or force the emotion. He just was. Calm, grounded, and heavy with presence. Audiences could feel it, even when he barely spoke. Then came 1945, the year everything changed. Mitchum played Lieutenant Bill Walker in the story of G.I. Joe, and that role flipped the script on his entire career. It earned him real attention, and even an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. From there, Hollywood couldn't ignore him anymore. The drifter had officially arrived. The story of G.I. Joe snagged 4 Academy Award nominations, and Robert Mitchum's nod for Best Supporting Actor became the only Oscar nomination of his entire career. At the 18th Academy Awards in 1946, he lost to James Dunn for A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, but that didn't matter. The message was loud and clear. Robert Mitchum had arrived. The film dropped on July 13th, 1945, running 108 minutes long, and the moment it hit theaters, studios saw gold. RKO wasted no time. They signed Mitchum for more films, turning the once-forgotten extra into a recognizable face audiences couldn't shake. But with that success came the Hollywood trap, typecasting. The studio quickly boxed him into the world-weary, tough guy mold, tossing him into gritty westerns like Nevada and West of the Pecos. These weren't blockbuster hits, but they became his training ground. The place where he learned how to command the screen with less flash and more quiet power. In Nevada, often cited as his first true starring role, he played a man on the run, wrongly accused of murder, a theme that fit him perfectly. Then came West of the Pecos, where he took on the role of Pecos Smith, moving with a calm confidence that showed how fast he was growing into his own rhythm on camera. These low-budget westerns didn't come with red carpets or glamour, but they sharpened his instincts, timing, pacing, and subtle control. And those lessons would define his entire career. Mitchum's trademark wasn't shouting or overacting. It was his stillness, those sleepy, heavy-lidded eyes, that loose slouch that seemed lazy but was actually razor-sharp. Everything about him said cool without trying. His voice carried dry humor. His pauses said more than most lines could, and that restraint made him magnetic. Some critics called it lazy acting, but it wasn't. It was precision disguised as ease. Mitchum even joked once that he only had 3 expressions, looking left, right, or straight ahead. And instead of denying it, he owned it. He turned that minimalism into art, letting silence speak louder than any speech ever could. He was tall, rugged, and unshakably calm. And that calm, that was the hook. Robert Mitchum didn't need to shout or pose. His stillness pulled people in like gravity. That vibe fit perfectly when film noir exploded onto the scene. As the genre rose, Mitchum slid right into its shadowy world of crime, betrayal, and broken souls, and it felt effortless, like he was born for it. He started showing his edge in Undercurrent, 1946, Crossfire, 1947, and Out of the Past, 1947, and by then he was unstoppable. His off-screen history, The drifter years, the fights, the run-ins with trouble, all of it gave his characters a raw authenticity you couldn't fake. In Crossfire, he played a war veteran haunted by what he'd seen in a story that boldly tackled anti-Semitism, a daring move for the time. The tone hit right at the heart of post-war America's tension and confusion, and Mitchum nailed it with quiet, heavy truth. Then came Out of the Past, the movie that cemented his legend in film noir forever. He played Jeff Bailey, a man trying to bury his sins and live a simple life running a gas station in a quiet town, praying the past would finally leave him alone. But peace never lasts in noir, and neither did his. His old life came roaring back through a slick crime boss and the dangerously magnetic femme fatale, Kathy Moffat, played by Jane Greer. The story twisted through flashbacks, lies, and doomed love. And Mitchum stayed cool through every turn, never breaking that fatal calm. He didn't play the victim or the hero. He was the man who knew he was trapped and walked into the fire anyway. By the time the credits rolled, there was no clean way out for Jeff Bailey. And that's exactly why the film still haunts audiences today. As these roles piled up, the line between Mitchum the man and Mitchum the character started to blur. The public saw the same drifter spirit, the same toughness, the same quiet danger, and it all felt real because deep down, it was. Then real life poured gasoline on the growing myth. On August 31st, 1948, Robert Mitchum's off-screen cool blew up in scandal when he was arrested in Los Angeles on marijuana charges after cops raided a small get-together with actress Lila Leeds and a few others. The next day, September 1st, 1948, police stormed a cottage at 8443 Ridpath Drive in Laurel Canyon. And this time, Mitchum, Leeds, and two more people were taken down in front of flashing cameras and chaos. Reports later revealed it wasn't some random bust. It was the grand finale of an 8-month surveillance operation by the Los Angeles Police Narcotics Division. They'd been watching that little house for months, waiting to make their move. And when they finally did, the media pounced like vultures. Headlines exploded across the world, and within hours, photos of Mitchum in handcuffs were everywhere. The scandal didn't just make news, it erupted into a full-blown Hollywood nightmare. When the case hit court, the drama only grew. On January 11th, 1949, Mitchum pleaded no contest to criminal conspiracy to possess marijuana, and the verdict was guilty. A few weeks later, on February 9th, 1949, the sentence came down. 1 year in county jail. Most of it got suspended, but he still had to serve 60 days and spend 2 years on probation. Even that didn't play out like people expected. Mitchum served about 47 to 50 days total, earning an early release for good behavior. His time was split between the county jail and a prison farm near Castaic, and that's where the image that would haunt him forever was born. Photographers caught him in a prison uniform, calm as ever, even milking a cow at the farm. Those pictures spread everywhere, the bad boy star turning punishment into a bizarre kind of publicity. Hollywood had never seen anything like it. Instead of destroying his career, the scandal made his legend bigger, bolder, and impossible to ignore. Deep down, Robert Mitchum was terrified. The scandal had him shaken. He feared it would destroy his marriage to Dorothy and wipe out everything he'd worked for. At that point, they were separated, and the headlines made it seem like the final blow. He knew his career could crumble overnight, but at the same time, there was that signature Mitchum fire. He didn't hide, didn't grovel, didn't fake apologies. He straight up admitted he'd been smoking marijuana for years and acted like he wasn't about to beg anyone for forgiveness. That mix of fear and defiance made him even more magnetic to the public. The system wanted to turn his arrest into a morality tale, but it backfired hard. Fans didn't see a criminal. They saw a rebel who refused to play by Hollywood's rules. Fan mail flooded in, box office numbers climbed, and the studios realized the truth. The bad boy image sold like crazy. The very thing meant to ruin him ended up branding him stronger than ever. It's wild when you trace the line. Every piece of his story fits perfectly together, like it was meant to build the myth step by step. The little boy who lost his father at 2 became the kid who fought school principals, then the restless teenager riding freight trains across the country. That same teenager turned into the young man who stumbled into theater, the factory worker who broke under pressure, and then the actor who discovered the power of silence on screen. And when the spotlight found him, the off-screen chaos only added to the mystique, turning Robert Mitchum from just another leading man into a symbol of unshakable cool. Each scar, each scandal, each quiet glare built that legend brick by brick. It didn't feel staged or crafted. It felt earned. From Bridgeport in 1917 to Hollywood in the 1950s, the drifter had turned himself into a star who didn't need to shout to own the room. By 1955, Mitchum stepped straight into one of the darkest, strangest stories Hollywood had ever dared to film. And the legend only grew darker from there. In 1955, Robert Mitchum stepped into one of the eeriest roles in film history, The Night of the Hunter. He played Harry Powell, a slick-talking preacher with a chilling smile and a heart full of darkness. The character was based on a real-life serial killer named Harry Powers, but Mitchum made him even scarier. Too real, too human. He etched the words love and hate across his knuckles, turning his own hands into symbols, props, and weapons all at once. But those hands weren't meant to bless. They were meant to control. As Powell, Mitchum twisted faith into manipulation, preaching to the desperate while plotting his next move. The film was set during the Great Depression, a time when money was more myth than reality, and everyone was just trying to survive. Powell slithered into that world like a snake in a suit, marrying a grieving widow and sliding into her home, only to turn his cold gaze on her children. He was convinced they knew where their dead father had hidden $10,000 in stolen cash, and he wouldn't stop until he had it. What made Mitchum's performance unforgettable was how quiet the evil was. He didn't rage or rant. He whispered. His voice stayed calm, smooth, and poisonous, his body still like a coiled trap. You could almost feel the danger before he even entered a scene. That kind of menace, calm, patient, and chilling, is why Harry Powell still stands as one of cinema's most haunting villains ever. But here's the twist. When The Night of the Hunter first hit theaters, audiences didn't know what to make of it. It was too strange, too dreamlike, too dark for its time. Critics were split. The surreal, fairy tale tone threw people off, and the box office numbers tanked, only around $10,000 worldwide. It was a total flop on paper, the kind that makes studios run for the hills. Yet time did what opening weekend couldn't. Decades later, people looked back and finally saw the genius, a masterpiece that had just been too far ahead of its time. Over time, The Night of the Hunter clawed its way back from failure to glory. Critics and movie lovers kept revisiting it piece by piece, decade after decade, until the world finally saw it for what it was, a haunting masterpiece. And right at the heart of that legacy stood Robert Mitchum, still cold, still smiling, still remembered as the most terrifying preacher ever to hit the screen. But Mitchum wasn't done scaring people, thus not even close. In 1962, he reinvented fear itself when he stepped into another unforgettable role, Max Cady in Cape Fear. This time, evil didn't hide behind religion or sermons. It stared straight at you with a vengeful grin. Max Cady was an ex-convict who'd spent 8 years behind bars for a brutal assault, and once he got out, he had one mission: to make the man who helped put him there, lawyer Sam Bowden, pay in the worst possible way. What made Cady terrifying wasn't just what he did, but it was how he did it. He didn't charge in with chaos. He moved slow, patient, calculating. He stalked Bowden's wife and teenage daughter, poisoned their peace, and even killed their dog. Every act designed to send a message of fear that never stopped growing. The movie didn't just flirt with danger. It tore through the limits of what audiences in the early 60s could handle, hinting at violence and cruelty in ways that felt disturbingly real. Unlike The Night of the Hunter, Cape Fear hit exactly how the studios dreamed it would. It was a box office smash, and critics couldn't stop talking about the suffocating tension and Mitchum's chilling performance. His portrayal left audiences rattled, calm, confident, and terrifyingly seductive all at once. The character of Max Cady became so iconic that Cape Fear was remade twice, but even decades later, no one captured that same mix of charm and menace quite like Mitchum did. He made evil magnetic, the kind of monster who could walk into a room, smile politely, and still make your skin crawl before you even realized why. What made Robert Mitchum's villains hit so hard was that they felt real, because in a way they were. He didn't come off like an actor pretending to be dangerous. He carried that danger with him, like it was built into his bones. People believed the edge they saw on screen was the same one he lived with off it, and the stories swirling around him only fueled that belief. Back in 1948, that infamous marijuana arrest with actress Lila Leeds threw Hollywood into shock. A late-night police raid, flashing cameras, handcuffs. It had all the makings of a scandal straight out of one of his movies. Mitchum ended up serving a week in county jail and 43 days on a prison farm. But instead of killing his career, it boosted it. The bad boy label became part of his legend, sharpening his public image into something dangerous, cool, and untouchable. Then there was the older story, the one about his teenage escape from a Georgia chain gang. Whether every detail was true or not didn't matter anymore. It sounded too good to question. Add in the rumors about bar brawls, drunken outbursts, and even tales of him hurling basketballs at photographers, and the legend of Mitchum, the rebel, just kept growing. Audiences didn't just see an actor. They saw a man who was Harry Powell or Max Cady beneath the surface, someone who could flip that switch if pushed. But those who actually worked with him saw a different side, the pro behind the chaos. Directors might have braced for his temper, but they also knew one thing. When the cameras rolled, Mitchum delivered. He hit his marks, nailed his lines, and could turn from joking around to radiating pure menace in a split second. Even when he blew up, smashing office furniture, cursing the set, or threatening to toss a camera across the room, he always came back, calm as ever, ready to shoot the scene like nothing happened. That contradiction, the rebel who worked like a craftsman, was exactly what made Robert Mitchum unforgettable. Robert Mitchum often brushed off questions about his acting style with a shrug and a smirk, making it sound almost too easy. Show up on time, know my lines, hit my marks, and go home, he'd joke, like the craft of movie stardom was just another day's work. People saw him as unpredictable, even wild, but deep down he was rock solid when it counted. That strange balance, chaos and reliability, rebellion and discipline, is exactly why his legend never fit neatly into one box. At home, though, the story wasn't simple. Mitchum married Dorothy Spence in March 1940, and their marriage lasted all the way until his death in 1997. Nearly 6 decades together. On paper, that sounds like stability, but behind closed doors, it was anything but calm. Mitchum publicly swore that he never loved anyone but Dorothy, but gossip painted a much messier picture. Their relationship was filled with arguments, long separations, and rumors of affairs that trailed him everywhere he went. Names floated around Hollywood like wildfire. Lucille Ball, Ava Gardner, Gene Simmons, Shirley MacLaine, Sarah Miles, and even author Edna O'Brien were all linked to him at one time or another. One of the most talked about scandals came in 1962, when he allegedly began a fiery affair with Shirley MacLaine that lasted 2 years. Stories swirled about secret trips to London, Paris, and West Africa. Pure tabloid gold. Some even claimed he had a separate 3-year romance with MacLaine's husband, though both denied it fiercely. Then there was Melanie, known in Hollywood's underbelly as Vampire, another name tied to his legend of danger and seduction. And of course, the whispered rumor of an on-set fling with Rita Hayworth during the filming of Fire Down Below in Trinidad back in 1957. A tale that just wouldn't die. Through all of it, Dorothy stayed. Friends and family later said she nearly walked out more than once, tired of the chaos and the heartbreak. But she didn't. Their marriage wasn't a fairy tale. It was a storm that somehow refused to break completely, no matter how wild the waves got. Their marriage wasn't a fairy tale. It was more like a long, painful test of loyalty that somehow never ended. And as the years went on, the drinking stories turned Robert Mitchum's outlaw reputation into legend. These weren't just rumors. People on set saw it all unfold. On the set of Rampage in 1963, there's a wild story that he downed 49 glasses of rum and still insisted on filming a scene. With a live tiger, the crew was horrified, certain it would end in disaster. But Mitchum, stubborn as ever, refused to back down. His fights were just as infamous. He didn't pick small ones either. One clash reportedly landed heavyweight boxer Bernie Reynolds in the hospital. The chaos followed him off camera, too. At a 1982 film premiere, things spiraled out of control when an intoxicated Mitchum allegedly assaulted a female reporter and hurled a basketball at a photographer, knocking out 2 of her teeth. The incident blew up into a $30 million lawsuit, and word around town was that the fallout wiped out his salary from the film completely. It became a pattern people couldn't ignore. The same dangerous cycle every time: charm, boredom, booze, then boom. A spark that turned into a full-blown explosion. And when he exploded, everyone around him knew it. Back in 1955, during the filming of Blood Alley, he got into a vicious argument with director William Wellman that spiraled into pure destruction. Mitchum lost control, trashed the studio office, smashed furniture, shattered windows, and even ripped a door clean off its hinges. Witnesses said it took security nearly 20 minutes to get him under control, and that wasn't the only eruption that year. While working on The Night of the Hunter, Mitchum clashed with Charles Lawton so fiercely that he allegedly threatened to throw a heavy camera at him. It took 5 crew members to restrain him before things got even uglier. Years later, during the filming of The Yakuza in 1974, his temper flared again. A misunderstanding over a prop sword ended with Mitchum getting into a fistfight with a Japanese extra. The poor man walked away missing 2 teeth. That was the Mitchum paradox: magnetic and menacing, professional and unpredictable. People never knew which version of him they'd get: the charming pro ready to shoot the scene, or the storm that could tear a set apart in seconds. These weren't small blow-ups. They were full-scale meltdowns that could stop an entire production cold. When Robert Mitchum lost control, the whole set felt it. The air got thick, everyone froze, and you could almost feel the danger in the room. But beneath all that chaos and noise, there was something deeper going on. A man at war with himself. Behind the tough talk and lazy grin hid years of depression, self-doubt, and bone-deep exhaustion. The mask cracked hardest during demanding shoots, like Ryan's Daughter in 1970, where the endless pressure pushed him close to collapse. By 1984, after years of heavy drinking and emotional storms, Mitchum finally did something nobody expected. He checked himself into the Betty Ford Center for Alcoholism Treatment. For a man as private and proud as he was, that move was huge. A rare moment of honesty in a life built on keeping things locked tight. People who really knew him described long stretches of isolation, sudden outbursts, and waves of sadness that seemed to grow heavier as he aged. That old chain gang trauma from his teenage years never truly left him either. It sat beneath the jokes and the swagger, buried deep but never gone, like an invisible bruise that wouldn't stop aching. That rebellious streak of his had roots that went way back, all the way to childhood. His father's death in a train accident when Robert was just 2 shattered his world before it ever had a chance to settle. After that, he was passed from one relative to another, learning young what it felt like to be unwanted in quiet, cutting ways. By the time he hit 14, he was already expelled from high school after fighting with his principal. A kid shaped by loss and anger, already done playing by rules that never seemed to protect him. Then came the drifting years, hopping freight trains, taking odd jobs, sleeping wherever he could find a spot to rest. In 1933, at just 15, he was arrested for vagrancy in Savannah, Georgia, and thrown into one of the toughest places imaginable, Chatham County Camp Number 1, a brutal chain gang where disease, violence, and hopelessness ruled every day. Those scars didn't fade. They just followed him into fame, hiding behind every cool smirk and camera flash. Robert Mitchum's time on that brutal chain gang left marks that never healed. He wore heavy leg irons until one of his legs got infected. The pain was unbearable, but instead of breaking him, it pushed him to act. During a roadwork detail, he made his daring escape, zigzagging through the woods while gunfire cracked through the air behind him. He ran for his life, eventually making it to Baltimore, where he stole a set of clothes, kept his head down, and just kept moving. In the years that followed, he learned how to survive by outsmarting the system. When money was gone and the streets got cold, he'd sometimes turn himself in just to get a bed and a hot meal. That simple act of cunning said everything about who he was becoming. A man who didn't trust rules, didn't trust authority, and didn't need anyone's permission to keep going. That hard-earned distrust built the outsider inside him, the loner who never quite belonged and never tried to. And that same spirit followed him to Hollywood. As the film industry shifted in the 1960s and 70s, the studio system collapsing, the old guard fading, Mitchum didn't vanish like so many others did. He adapted. He kept landing big roles and proving that he still had the presence to carry any film. In 1962, The Longest Day brought him into an all-star ensemble that raked in a massive $32 million worldwide. Then came El Dorado in 1966, a box office hit that pulled over $4 million, a serious number for the time. By 1970, Ryan's daughter reminded critics just how powerful he could be, even earning him another Oscar nomination. And in 1973, the Friends of Eddie Coyle showed a different kind of brilliance, a slow-burn crime drama that critics would later call one of the best of the decade. He even revealed his dry, playful side in The Good Guys and the Bad Guys, 1969, showing that he could shift from menace to humor without losing an ounce of that quiet intensity. The roles might have changed, but the core never did. He was still the hard-edged patriarch, the morally tangled loner, the man who looked like he'd seen too much and didn't feel the need to explain it. And in 1991, fate brought it all full circle. Martin Scorsese's Cape Fear remake gave Mitchum a cameo as Lieutenant Elgart, a sly wink to the nightmare character he'd created decades earlier. It was the perfect tribute, the old master of menace returning one last time to the world he helped define. When Martin Scorsese remade Cape Fear in 1991, it wasn't just another thriller. It was a rebirth of terror itself. Gregory Peck returned for a brief cameo. Robert De Niro stepped into the role of the new, unhinged Max Cady. And the movie became a massive hit, pulling in an unbelievable $179 million worldwide. It was even dedicated to the memory of J. Lee Thompson, the director of the 1962 original that started it all. Mitchum didn't need much screen time in the remake. His brief appearance was enough to remind everyone exactly where the fear began. Just seeing him again, older but still carrying that dangerous calm, sent a chill through audiences. But Mitchum wasn't done surprising people. In the 1980s, he found an entirely new audience, not in theaters, but on television. He took on the role of Captain Victor Pug Henry in the epic miniseries The Winds of War, 1983, and later returned in its sequel, War and Remembrance, 1988. These weren't small TV projects. They were monumental productions. The Winds of War alone cost around $26 million to make and drew in more than 140 million viewers in its first week. As Pug Henry, Mitchum embodied quiet power, a man who carried command without ever needing to raise his voice. Even though he was older than the character was meant to be, audiences didn't care. They believed every second of it. He had that rare weight, the kind of lived-in gravity that made him feel like someone who had been through it all. He didn't seem like a fading movie star trying to hold on. He felt like the real thing, a man whose experience anchored an entire generation of storytelling. And what's wild is how his style never changed even as decades passed. He didn't chase trends, didn't try to act younger, didn't reinvent himself for new eras. The same half-amused, half-weary vibe stayed with him. The energy of the drifter, the soldier, the detective, the loner. His characters always carried their past with them, and so did he. That consistency became his strength. People trusted him. His presence could lend instant credibility to any project, no matter how big or small. And then there's that one image, the snapshot that's still passed around today because it feels too cinematic to be real. In 1969, Mitchum took delivery of a Porsche 911 Targa straight from Stuttgart, Germany. Only 307 of them were built for the German market that year, and with its 170 horsepower engine, it was a machine that matched his personality perfectly. Sleek, powerful, and quietly dangerous. He drove it across Europe, eventually arriving in Ireland to film Ryan's daughter. Photos from that time say it all. Mitchum leaning against the Porsche, cigarette dangling from his fingers, staring off like a man who was the myth. No acting, no pretending, just Robert Mitchum, exactly as the world imagined him. Robert Mitchum wasn't just a movie star. He was a man whose real-life adventures could go toe-to-toe with his greatest screen roles. Even his infamous 1948 arrest turned into something out of a Hollywood script, layered with mystery and legend. On August 31st, 1948, Los Angeles police raided a small house and caught Mitchum smoking marijuana with actress Lila Leeds and a few others. The media storm hit instantly. Reporters flooded the scene. Cameras flashed, and Mitchum, cool as ever, stood his ground. He didn't hide or beg for sympathy. Instead, he shrugged and said he'd been smoking for years, refusing to play the victim. He was sentenced to 60 days, serving part of it in county jail and part on a prison farm. Later reports suggested the whole case might have been pushed as part of a wider anti-drug campaign, and eventually, some accounts even claimed he'd been exonerated. But by that point, it didn't matter. The story had already fused itself into his legend. Hollywood kept retelling it, polishing it, twisting it, until it became something even bigger than the man himself. And then, finally, the body that had carried so much myth began to break down. Robert Mitchum passed away on July 1st, 1997, at the age of 79, from complications related to lung cancer and emphysema. He had smoked and drank for most of his life, almost defiantly, even as the warnings piled up. By then, his filmography stretched across 6 decades, with over 100 films and countless television appearances to his name. In his later years, he lent his iconic voice to narrate Tombstone in 1993 and made his final on-screen appearance in James Dean, Race with Destiny in 1997. But what he left behind wasn't just a career, it was a feeling. That voice, deep, slow, edged with danger. That stare, calm, knowing, tired but unbreakable. Mitchum didn't need to act like a tough man. He was one, shaped by loss, rebellion, and survival. Even today, actors talk about him when they discuss what it means to be effortlessly cool on screen, to command a room without ever raising your voice. Robert Mitchum didn't just play legends. He became one. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life and legend of Robert Mitchum, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment below.